next Thursday, so I'm gonna leave on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to stand up so I don't get any feedback. My name is Michaela. There we go. My name is Michaela. I am the manager of Sankofa, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here. Is it anyone's first time being here at Sankofa? I don't see too many people. Hey, welcome. And you stay for the event. What's your name? Shadi. Sydney. Welcome, Sydney Aquaba. Tonight we have the pleasure of having the fabulous Victoria Carlos here to speak on her book, Akata, the Saga of an American Girl Finding Her Roots. It is a story that so much reflects what Sankofa is. Sankofa the bookstore and also Sankofa the movie. There's some really, a lot of parallels. So a little bit about the author. Victoria Carlos is a writer, poet, speaker, and educator. She's the owner of OCC and Company, a lifestyle brand promoting the chicness of the African diaspora. She's a wife and a proud mom of two boys. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Victoria Carlos.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. Before we dive deep into the questions, I just want to know, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah. So the question was, she asked me to tell me about myself. So I am born in DC, Sibley Hospital, raised in Silver Spring, Maryland. I went to Trinity Washington University and then got my graduate degree at Hawaii Pacific University. From there, I had a trouble finding a job, but while I was finding a job, I did a lot of freelance work helping small and large businesses do like social media content, what is it called? Marketing. like I was like a digital marketing manager for, small, that's how like my hustle. And then, the rest, I talk about it in my book.
Yes, she does. I just want to let you know, let everyone know, I read this book cover to cover in one sitting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very intriguing, and I was very invested in your journey. I'll say this to the mic. I read the book cover to cover, and I wanted to let her know that I was just very invested in her journey, how you began, and I just needed to know how you were going to end up. I needed to know your ancestor stories, and I needed to know that like you're going to be okay. Yeah, it was very important. Here, you keep this. Okay. Before we start, I wanted to know, could you please read the poem that's at the beginning of your book? Yes, and tell us how it came about.
Okay. So for the preface of the book, I put a poem because sometimes when you buy a book, you just want to get into the story. So I didn't write a long, drawn-out preface. So I wanted to write a poem that encapsulated my journey. And once you know my story, the poem will make sense. I'm sorry, that answer is so not deep. But here it is. It's an untitled poem. You can't run from who you are, colored girl. My ancestors' voices whispered in the east wind. I ran west. Colored girl, look at those deep brown eyes, able to see right through souls. They spoke as the wind blew dust in my eyes. You can't run. You can't run. I hid in the cracks of the mountains. I spat in my hands and cleaned my eyes. Suddenly, I saw people before me, but they looked like trees. Look at your stance and the softness of your shoulders, colored girl. They're soft because you're standing on our rough backs. Take a closer look at us. I rubbed my eyes again and found myself on top of a tall oak tree. I looked down and saw my ancestors looking back at me. There's nowhere to run. It's your turn to carry the crown, colored girl. I bowed my head and I surrendered to the God who sustained me.
All right. Thank you. Before you even get into the research and start on your journey with the genealogy part, you have a whole backlog, a whole backstory. I want to know, can you get into that for us as far as your identity, that whole question of where are you from? You got that a lot. So how did you come to get into your genealogy before processing that part of your life?
Okay. So, being a dark-skinned girl living in this part of the world, it was something that I have to deal with every single time I left my house. And I went to a predominantly white school, so people would automatically label me as African, and even the Africans in my community wanted to also take claim of me. But because I received a lot of bullying for not only being a dark-skinned girl, I also received bullying from my how should I say it? Because I received bullying from being a dark-skinned girl, right? I didn't want to claim any blackness. So it's funny, if you have the updated version of the book, which this is, chapter 1 is labeled anti-black. Before it was labeled no thank you. Like I wanted to say no thank you to my skin, my identity. So I would also identify as an American. Like don't even put black in front of it. Don't even put African in front of it because it came with a whole bunch of pain. So I just grew up all the way up until the age of 24, like hating myself and didn't realize that I was hating myself. Yeah, that's how it happened.
That is deep. So, can you tell us more about your spiritual journey and how it ultimately led to Akata?
Yes.
And then we can get into the name of the book also.
Yes. So, in the beginning of the book, I talk about how my father took us to church every Sunday, right? A Baptist church, actually not too far away from here. But he was also a Nation of Islam enthusiast and was into other like ancient Asian like spirituality. So I grew up within an eclectic spiritual background. So I would literally go to school and acknowledge Jesus as Lord and Allah. So just talk about just like confusion. So when I went to, and I already said the school that I went to, which was Trinity Washington University. I didn't name them in the book, but oops. I was bullied on campus. And because it's a Catholic university, I assumed that everybody on the campus was Christian as well. So I said to myself, if everybody on this campus is Christian and I'm receiving bullying on campus from the top all the way down to the bottom, I said, I want no parts of it. So I went there as a lukewarm Christian, but graduated as an atheist. So by the time that I went to graduate school, so I packed up my stuff and moved all the way to the state of Hawaii. I was an atheist and I experienced a lot of bullying and just nonsense while I was on that island. But in the book, I talk about how I went to, I did modeling around that time, and a famous photographer took a photo of me and had an art gallery opening in Hollywood. So I flew from Hawaii to Hollywood, and I met a witch. Shout out to all the witches. I met a witch in Hollywood, California, that just completely changed my life, and scammed me out of almost thousands of dollars. So because I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, because of her, I knew that Jesus was Lord. So when I decided to give my life to Christ, the first thing that he asked me to do was to find my ancestors. And I said, you're really asking me to do the one thing that I don't want to do. Like, don't ask me to do that. And I literally put God on hold. Like, I was Jonah, if you know the story of Jonah in the Bible, and didn't want to do it. But looking back on it, it's like, if you don't even want to acknowledge who you are, like, how can you be used? And that goes for anybody of any faith. Like, and it's so sad to see anybody of any race be self-hating. So I really thank God for his life for putting me on this journey, because I now have 2 young sons. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And if I didn't go through this journey, I would be raising self-hating Black boys. You know, the same ones that are getting targeted in the street. Like, no. And honestly, and I hate to veer left, but, you know, our community has a history of, like, Black men who make it, and we tend to date outside of our race. And some of it is genuine, you know, we love that. But the other part of it is, you know, self-hate. Like, you want to deny your own people because of the anti-Blackness that you grew up with. So, yeah, that's why I believe that God, you know, took me out of the pits of hell and said, your first mission is to find yourself and then tell people how to find themselves.
And it wasn't just like you heard a whisper; you were getting visions of this, right? Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what did it look like? What was the experience like?
Yeah. So when I decided to, now we're getting to the part, and I talk about this in the book. My first prayer as a pre-born again Christian, I asked God to give me a job. And I talk about the struggles of me trying to find a job. And I said, God, if you please give me this job, I'll go to church one time, just one time, to say thank you. Amen. And the next day I got a job. So I said, oh, snap. I have to go to church to say thank you. So I go to church to say thank you, and and I talk about all the stuff that happens during that first service. But I picked up a Bible and read it myself. So as I was reading the Bible, something supernatural happened to me. I don't want to spoil it, but it's in the book. But my first spiritual gift as a Christian was dreams, visions, and prophecy. And basically, God gave me 5 dreams from Monday to Friday, and I saw everything that was going to happen in like 10 years into the future from that point on.
10 years.
Yes. So this book covers, from me giving my life to Christ till, the end of the book. That's about 4 years. And then the other book will cover the other years. Yeah, it's coming.
Can't wait.
But yeah, so anyway, I just saw a whole bunch of dreams, and God was basically telling me in the dreams, you need to go find your ancestors. This is the people who you're going to meet. Somebody close to you is going to die. Like these dreams were very specific. I literally thought that I was losing my mind. Because the church that I was going to, it's a Bible believing church. It taught me how to read the Bible, but the spiritual aspects that's very, prevalent in the world was not taught to me. Like, we weren't taught to pay attention to our dreams. We weren't taught, like demonology. We weren't taught like there's spirits out here, like nothing. So I literally thought that I was losing.
You didn't have anything to rely on to compare it to.
No.
So finally, you honor that the visions or the dreams that you were getting.
Yep.
And take us on that journey with your parents, giving your parents the DNA test. So why did you choose to give them the DNA test versus you taking the DNA test?
That's a nice question. So when I got these dreams, God told me that I had to quit the job that I prayed for. And this is why the confusion happened, because I said, get thee behind me, Satan. Because I'm like, I prayed for this dream and God for this dream. So I'm like, this can't be the same God who's asking me to quit my dream job. So when I didn't quit my dream job, because I wasn't going to quit my dream job to follow my ancestors, no, I was not. I was not in line with that. God got me fired on Ash Wednesday of, 2015. And he had to do it on that day, so I knew that it wasn't like, I can't blame my bosses. I don't have any hatred or malice towards them. Like, no, it was God who got me fired to get me on track. So because I was still disobedient, I basically worked through all of my savings and had $300 left in my account. So I said, okay, God, like, I'm done running away from you. If you want me to find my ancestors, I'm gonna buy 2 DNA kits and test my parents. So I'm like, there's no point in me DNA testing myself when I'm like, I can knock 2 birds with 1 stone, because I know, okay, I make up half of my mother and half of my father. But so it just made sense not to test myself and to test them. So that's why I did it.
Got you. Okay, so then you give them the DNA test and you have like this whole thing of showing them their results.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what they thought about before they actually got, like, because I know your mom had an idea of what she was, and so did your dad. So can you talk a little bit about that?
About how they felt about the journey,
or
before?
No, after they, before and after, sorry.
Okay.
So before, what did your mom think? After they got the results, what was the effect on them?
Honestly, my parents were excited. Like, we're like close but not close. Like, we're close in proximity, but like intimacy wise, emotionally, like we didn't. So this was like a family activity that we could all partake in. I know, this is what I'm saying. That I said in the book, like, I was like restoring my family through this journey, because it really brought us together, and they were excited. Like, never in a million years were they gonna take a DNA test on their own, but it was good. They were excited.
That's sweet. And I know you told your brother, and he had like a lukewarm reaction, and he said something like, it's not really going to change my day to day, but for you said it did. So can you talk about how that transformation happened in you? What was the result?
Yes. So she's talking about when I told my brother our DNA test, he basically had a nonchalant answer. And before I had my spiritual awakening, I would have given the same response. So I'm not even upset that he was just like, okay, I don't care. But he had said to me, like, this does not affect my day-to-day life. And I said, no, I'm like, I have the complete opposite experience because every day when I walk out the house, people are always trying to claim me. And if you don't have an identity, that can bring so much confusion because people are pulling at you every single day. So I'm like, I now have something to say.
Yes. So do you, like, when people now ask, or shortly after that, did your answer change? Like when people ask, who are you? What are you?
Let me tell you what. That's a nice question. Okay, so it made me even more proud to be an American. It made me more proud to be an American. Because before I'm like, I don't care. Like anytime we would, do Black History Month, I'm like, I didn't care about all of those things. But after I went through my journey and taking my DNA test, I'm like, wow, like I know the names of my American ancestors. I know the trials and tribulations. I know the contributions that they did in this community. So the DNA test, of course, you find out, which African countries and other countries that you're from. But so my answers didn't really change because I still say, I'm from, the DMV area and my parents are from South Carolina and I'm American. Like I can say that confidently instead of being like, oh my God, stop asking me that question. But if people probe more, which they always do, then I can tell them, okay, my father is this, my mother is this. But it's a more pleasant, conversation because before I hated that.
Now you have something to pull from.
Yeah.
Yeah, got you. Okay, so during that process of when you first started your journey into learning who your ancestors were, you kind of spoke to your dad, and he told you that your grandmother's, your last name was your grandmother's maiden name.
Yeah.
So, which is Greg or Greg's,
yes, Greg.
Right? Okay, Greg. Can you talk about how it felt to learn later on where that name came from?
Yeah, it was okay.
Without, I don't want to spoil it, just as much or as little detail as you can give.
You know what? I'm happy you asked me that question because I had my father read the book before I sent it off to the publishing people. And in the end of my book, I talk about how, like, if I'm going to encourage other people to find out their DNA, to be prepared for skeletons that may come out your closet. And this was, to me, a skeleton that came out of the closet. So, and it wasn't my father who told me. I found it by reading my grandmother's obituary. So I never met my father's mother. So when I, read through her obituary, I realized that my last name is her maiden name. And I found out that, my father didn't know her. That's how my father didn't know his father, and that his mother fell in love with a married man, had him, and then he chose to be with his original family. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, like my grandmother is an adulterer. And I said that in the book, and my father was like, don't drag my mom like that. Like, can you not? Like, can you please take that out?
So you took it out?
Right, I took it out, but I find out information from a woman I've never met. I'm like, no, that like threw off my equilibrium. So yeah, that's
delving on the same topic. If you want, if you can talk about the name Greg, and also you thought that a lot of enslaved people after they freed and left the plantation, or maybe they stayed and were doing working the farm, they changed their name. Many of them did. And you thought maybe that's how you got the name Greg. But you found out it was actually something different and probably one of those skeletons that you just Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So without getting into, so I was basically invited to Ancestry.com, right? The headquarters in Utah. And I got to interview the people, asking them how can Black people use their service to find their ancestors. So that's where I found out that many, like she said, many enslaved Africans could have possibly changed their name after they've been emancipated. So it could make ancestry research a little bit hard if you knew that your ancestors have possibly changed their name. So in the back of my mind, when I heard that, I said, wow, I hope I'm in that bucket, and I was wrong. So I basically, long story short, found a genealogy mentor who basically found out that not only did my ancestors not change their name, that my ancestors were enslaved in Mars Bluff, South Carolina, and part of the plantation homes is still preserved nestled in the campus of Francis Marion University.
Wow.
So when I found out that information, I wanted to vomit. I said, I've been living, and I think I was maybe 23 at the time. I said, I've been walking around here with a slave name this whole time from my mother's, my grandmother's maiden name. Like, I didn't even want to, it's like, I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this, but like, not even wanting to say your own name fully. Like, I went through a season just saying my name is Victoria, period. Like, I'm Madonna. Like, there is no last name. I didn't want to say my last name because I was completely like disgusted with that fact. So yeah, that's another skeleton.
And
Let me look out for it.
yes, it goes even deeper than that, y'all. Like as far as family history goes and connections and relations. So please get the book, read it, and find out what happened. Going back into your research, and you mentioned that you got help. What was the name of the woman who helped you? Miss?
I named her Miss Lisa.
Miss Lisa in the book. Okay. Can you tell me what wisdom she imparted on your journey when you were actually doing research? Because there are so many ways we can do research.
Yes.
Many archives, and you started using Ancestry.com and other things. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So she imparted a lot of wisdom, but I want to say, and I don't know if this is going to answer your question and how you want me to answer it, but the main thing that she imparted me was she was giving me all this information, but I couldn't receive it. And I came across so cold. So I just remember conversations with her saying, Vicky, like, you can't change the past, like, embrace it. Like, you can put a new spin to it, you know. Yeah, she would tell me things like, you know, this is, you know, where your people are from, and here's their information, and I'm like, I couldn't.
Yeah. In the book, you said I'm trying to process it, like.
Yeah. So can we talk about how I met the owner of this bookstore?
Yeah. Let's go to the connection of Sanko for the bookstore. Yeah. Haile Garima, Shrikiana Garima.
I can't remember the first time I met him. I don't know. I don't think I just stumbled here. I think I was invited or I met him at another event. But I remember telling him what I was doing. Because, by the way, this book was originally supposed to be a documentary with me and my ex. But okay. So I met the owner. I can't remember where. But he was just like, oh, I made a movie. You should watch the movie. So he sent me the link to his movie, right? And I'm watching Sankofa. I don't know if you guys have seen it. And
30th year anniversary of the movie, by the way.
Oh, wow, congratulations for that. So I watched the movie and I cried. I was bawling my eyes out from the very first scene of that movie, okay? Let me set it up for you guys. So there's a black woman, beautiful, gorgeous black woman. She's on the beach. And she's even doing a photo shoot, just being real loud, real ignorant, but real fabulous at the same time. And I think she like trips and hits her head on a rock or something. And like she's brought back to like her to the past.
She's in the El Camino. Is it Camino? What's the castle?
El Mina.
Castle.
It was Cape Coast Castle.
It was Cape Coast Castle.
Right.
And she goes and has her
transformative experience. So she basically like gets amnesia and is brought back to the past and goes through it, and now she's like a woke black person, right? And I'm like, this man did a documentary on me. I'm like, because I was that ignorant model, just in her own fabulous world, just laughing and giggling. And it's like, you don't even know, like you have work to do. And I basically told him, so after I watched the movie, I emailed him. I said, this movie is the story of my life. I said, I was that ignorant model who had self-hate, had no care in the world, and I needed to be brought back to the past so I can wake up to the future and do something, more productive with my life. And I was telling the story to him, and he's looking at me like this was supposed to be fiction. So he was just like, like it was just like, ooh, like ooh, come back. I have some more stuff to teach you. So I'm just so thankful that even years like that, I met him maybe like 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, that he was like remembered me and said, Vicky, come back. So yeah, I'm so grateful.
Yeah, he never forgot you. He's the reason why you're here. He's like, look, she has this book, make it happen. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm only gonna ask. I'm only gonna ask a couple more questions, and then I'm gonna turn it over to the already have a few comments. So I'm just gonna read a couple.
Okay.
Someone was like, "Love the outfit," and then
I'm a wolf model now. Okay.
I read the book in a few hours. So good.
Oh wow.
It's imperative that people understand identity, origination, and where one finds their new identity. This book had both. Wow. So yeah, very nice. My next question is the one we should have asked in the beginning. Yeah. So why the title Akata? And what does the word Akata mean?
Yes. Do you know so many people have fought me to change?
Sure.
Oh yes, to change that title. They would say that I'm committing career suicide, or I didn't have a career. Yeah, you know, that I would be dividing the community. But if you don't know, Akata, so there's a lot of discrepancies about the origins of the word. But from my research, I found out that it originated from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And it's basically a slang term used for African Americans. I think the literal translation is like wild dog or wild beast. But it's funny because a lot of people from the continent really don't use that word to associate with African Americans. It's really African people in America calling Black Americans or, like second generation and beyond Africans who, grow up outside in the diaspora.
Right, outside of the culture.
Right. So it's basically the equivalent to like the N-word. So when Black people discover this word, through me, like they get offended. And I'm offended that they're offended. Because when I was bullied for being dark skinned, it came from my own people as well as other people. And I know the bullying that other Africans feel because I was getting it because people already automatically assume that I'm African. So I'm like, no. We have many colorful names for our African brothers and sisters. So don't act brand new now.
So is this you like reclaiming?
No, hell no. I'm not reclaiming. No, I'm not reclaiming anything. But I wanted to call it Akata because I want when an African person picks up this book, because I feel like a lot of them don't understand the Black plight. Because when they come here, they become successful. They don't have like the hang-ups that we do. So when they see us, they kind of like pity us.
Why are you like this? What happened?
Exactly. So when I tell my story from start to finish, and I got this feedback from a lot of Africans who are like, damn, I get it now. I get why you are angry at the government. I get why you're angry at police brutality. I understand that. And to me, I'm like, I didn't think it was that hard to understand. But it's like this is who you're calling an Akata. The one who has a slave name. The one who is lost. The one who doesn't have an identity unless I go through it. This is who you're calling an Akata. When you should be calling me your sister. You should be calling me your aunt. You should be calling me your best friend. You hear me? Yes. So I'm not reclaiming shit. Excuse my language.
No.
I'm not reclaiming it. And you know what? And it's funny because, if this book blows up in Jesus' name, I don't want to be known as the Akata girl.
Oh yeah, so you got to be right now.
Yeah, I don't want to be known. I don't want to die and they're like, oh, that's not even the Akata girl. Don't want that.
When you have the community showing your documentary, just a short version of it to raise funds, like you said that people would stand up and have that. They would say that, oh, I didn't know. I thought Black people were just lazy, and one of the underlying themes or something you echo throughout the book is that you have a mission and you want to create, healing, healing for Black people. Can you talk about that? And not just Black people, but like you say,
the nation.
Yeah, the nation.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you brought that up. So the healing between the diaspora is I'm trying to wake Black people up to find out who they are. And when you tell people to find out who you are, they're like, oh, not everybody's from Africa. Okay, we'll find out. If you're not from Africa, good. There's research out there that will tell you if you are indigenous to this nation, okay? Or indigenous everywhere. But it's important to know. And I love how, if anybody's seen, what was that, Black Panther 2? When the Black Panther was about to kill, what's the name, on the floor?
Yeah, Namor.
Yeah, and then you had that flashback scene. And they were basically telling you these people can claim Africa as well. So I want to echo to the people, especially if they're in the room or in the live, if you're one of those people who are like, oh, not all Black people came from Africa, we're indigenous. The indigenous people also can claim, their rightful ownership to the continent as well. But so through sharing my story, I want there to be healing within the diaspora because I just believe there's a lot of ignorance all across the board. But in the end of the book, I say that I want healing within the nation because and we didn't talk about this, but I met I don't want to spoil too many stories, but I met white cousins who, you know, are related to me, and they given me apologies. Ooh. Has anybody seen You People on Netflix?
Yes.
Okay. And watch that movie. The acting, in my humble opinion, is terrible. but but what I loved about You People, did you watch it?
I did.
Okay. At the end, when the mother-in-law apologizes on behalf of all white people, I said, damn it, somebody needed to see that. Some black person watching needed to hear for the first time a white person apologize for A, their ancestors, and B, their ignorance. And if you never get to experience it, the show provided that for you. And that's basically what happened in my book.
You say it in the back, so you want to talk about one of those instances? It's not too much.
The man or the woman?
I would say the man because the woman is too big. So let's just go to the man.
Yes. So another storyline to my story is my father doesn't know his father. So as I was looking for his ancestors, I'm also trying to find his father. So through Ancestry.com, I grew tired of reaching out to black people who had no answers. So I said, let me slide in some white people's DMs. And one of the white people I reached out to, he turns out to be a fourth cousin of mine. And through my genealogy mentor, I found out, you know, about the slave owner, who's by the way, his name is Joseph Gray, and me and the white gentleman are connected through him. So the slave owner, Joseph Gray, is my fifth great grandfather. And I think for him it was like his eighth, something like that. Don't ask me. Look at me. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm working on a documentary. Can we meet in person? And he said, yeah. So he flew us out to Atlanta, and I wanted to have a conversation about our shared history. And because I'm still dealing with like a lot of self-hate, anti-blackness, I thought I could have an academic conversation about our shared history with this white man. Like, I wanted to ask him, like, how has your process been? You know, right. Like, I didn't want the questions so I was asking him questions to avoid him asking me questions. But it got to a point where he was like, I had asked him a question. I said, so why aren't more black and white people doing this? And he looked down and he was like, we're not doing this because some white people are afraid. And I said, afraid of what? He said, we're afraid that you guys are going to ask us for money. Huh. Even saying that now, I'm getting so hot. Because, like, I was so ashamed to be black at that moment. And like I said, he flew us out there, me and my ex. He bought our plane tickets. He paid for the hotel. He paid for the rental car. He paid for the food. So I have this white man telling me that more black and white people aren't having this conversation because we're afraid that you guys are going to ask us for money, you know, for some sort of reparations. Like, that was like, I've gone through a lot of embarrassing things in my life. The whole book is like my embarrassment, but that conversation right there took the cake. So when he saw me almost fall out of my seat, then he asked me, how has this whole experience been for you? And I told him, like, I literally closed my eyes to make sure that, like, no tears would come out of my eyes. And I swallowed my saliva to make sure that my throat wouldn't crack when I said this. I told him, I said, this has been painful. I said, I'm tired of reading slave narratives. I'm so tired of reading slave schedules. I'm tired of reading all these documents that showcase that my people aren't even human, but cargo and inventory. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I told him I had to stop researching for a couple of months because I'm like, mentally, I couldn't take it. Which is going back to the movie Sankofa. I'm like, yo, that's my life. Like, I wasn't just reading these documents, I was in them. I'm seeing visions of the horror my people went through. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, if I was getting it early on in life, I'd have to go through this experience because I did it. I had to go through that. I had to go through the same way that the woman in the movie had to go through her process to get it. And the gentleman says, you know, on behalf of all white people, I'm so sorry. for what my people have done to your people. And I couldn't take it. I said, who am I? Like the weight of his apology felt like 50 million bricks. I said, who? I said, I've been running away from my culture, my history, my ancestry, my entire life. And here you are apologizing on behalf of your ancestor, my ancestors. I'm like, oh, go apologize to somebody else who's been in, in the fight, in the struggle. Like, not me. But I said, and that's how I knew that like this story was important, because I need Black people to know that there's white people out here who are apologizing, and you need to hear it. Because guess what? When he apologized, it felt like a weight had been lifted. I didn't even know I was carrying. Or in the book, I said I didn't know I was carrying it, or I didn't care to know that I was carrying it. But literally, I experienced deliverance when he apologized to me. So when I say that my book is to heal the nation, I need every Black person to know that there's white people out here apologizing for their role in slavery. And if you could be gracious enough to receive that. And, ooh, I'm gonna stop right there. I don't wanna get emotional.
Okay, we're going through with you, like especially if you read the book. You ride that roller coaster. I wrote the book. I said, oh my God, I know. And also, there's a parallel story happening like in your personal life. So I feel like we really get to know you in the book. I want to turn to the audience now. Do you all have any questions out here or online? Yes, ma'am. You want to come up here?
They won't be able to hear you on the recording, so maybe.
That's a nice thought.
Okay, so I haven't read the book, but thank you so much for your testimony, your story, and writing this book. I know that the word, well, I can say this. I am mixed with continental African. I have family members that are from there. And I do know, right down here at Howard, back in the 60s and so, I kind of heard a little bit about this word Akata. And it's how it kind of evolved, because with the way it was being described to me, that it was a bit sexualized, and that it was the behavior of Black American women towards the men. And it was a derogatory way of speaking about Black American women. And then it would be later on that I heard it was just like a general, overall negative word for Black American folks or second generation continental African children. But in all of your experience, since I haven't read the book, first of all, have you had the opportunity to travel to the continent at all and actually live or spend any reasonable amount of time there? And what impact, if you have, what impact has that had on you?
Ooh, that's a nice question. First of all, thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna go deeper in that word, because I didn't know that that was a part of the word's history. I did go to Africa, and that's actually going to be in book number 2. But to answer your question, it changed my life. I wasn't there long enough, I can tell you that. But I plan to go back. But stay tuned for book 2, because I want to, that's a whole, Any other questions?
I just got here, so like, what's like your like book about and everything? Sorry, you probably like said this already. You probably explained this like 5 times.
No, it's okay. I can do a recap. So basically, my book is called Akata, the Saga of an American Girl Finding Her Roots. And I basically talk about my journey to finding my ancestors. I had a foundation of growing up anti-Black, and how I basically, after I gave my life to Christ, the first thing that God told me to do was to find my ancestors. And I went on a crazy journey to find them. And I found the American side. So this is what the book is about. It talks about my foundation and all the American history. But then book 2, I'm going to talk about, what I found out about my African ancestors.
Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. Yes,
Yeah, I have a question. My question is, do you think that this book can be read in Florida?
You know what? I have a goal of, I want my book to be in school. So you know what? You just gave me a mission, Mr. President. I'm gonna get it to Florida. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned, I see that you had the 23andMe kits.
Yes.
And you mentioned Ancestry.com. Did you use any other? It's a 2-part question, depending on the answer. Did you use any other ancestry services? Which ones did you use other than the 23andMe and Ancestry.com?
No, that's a good question. Okay, and I talk about this in the book. So, because you missed it, I'm gonna say it again. So, one of my struggles in the book was finding a job. So, when God told me to find my ancestors, I quit my job and then, spent all my savings. So, I spent my last coin on 2 Ancestry DNA kits. And the reason why I chose Ancestry.com is because the test was $99. And I know that there's a Black-owned company called African Ancestry, but their DNA kits were like $2.99 or $1.99. That was out of my budget. I couldn't afford that. So that's the only reason why I did it. No, that's not the only reason why. That's part of the reason why I didn't go with them. The other reason why I didn't go with AfricanAncestry.com, but I will eventually, is because I didn't want to limit my search to going only back in the continent when I knew that there's a possibility that my father, because he's, a lighter skin tone than me, could be from other places. So yes, to answer your question, I used Ancestry.com, and then the white gentleman who offered the apology paid for me to get a 23andMe kit. But I'd say in the book that it really doesn't matter which DNA kit you use because there's a website called GenMatch where you can upload any results from any DNA kit into their system and they can cross-check your DNA with any other people on that database. So that's
What's the name of that?
GEN match, like matches.com.
While we wait for people online to ask questions, because someone just asked if they can ask questions, can you give the audience some advice? Like, I know a lot of people here might be interested in starting their own journey and searching for their ancestors. So how did you start? What tips? You have tips at the end of your book. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So my first tip, if you're interested in finding your ancestors, number one, talk to your people. Okay. Like if I didn't have deep conversations with my parents about their ancestry, I wouldn't have gotten any information. And I feel like that's like a duh moment, but I explained in the beginning that like me and my family weren't close. Like we weren't taught. How did I not know that my own last name was my grandmother's maiden name? So if you don't have a close relationship with your family, but you have relatives in your family who would know information that you need, talk to them. And it was through my mother who had like a whole box of obituaries. So I took her whole box of obituaries and I plugged them all into the family tree system into Ancestry.com. So that would be number one is A, talk to your people. B, pick a site and then do your family tree and plug in all the names. Then I would, of course, take a DNA test. It doesn't matter which DNA test you go with. Well, in my humble opinion, it doesn't matter. And then upload it to GenMatch. So it all depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is to like find a long lost person, then yeah, like GenMatch would be like the best place for you to upload your raw data because it's gonna cross-check it from 50 million DNA options. But if your goal is to actually find your ancestors and go as far back as you want, then yeah, I think MyHeritage but specifically Ancestry.com is the best place to do it because they have the largest database of slave schedules, ship records, wills. Like I read the will of my ancestor, Joseph Gregg, his will, because my family tree stopped around 1870 with a woman named Venus. And I'm like, oh, I can't find either her husband or her parents. But it wasn't until I read Joseph Gregg's will and saw that he bestowed Venus and her 3 children to his daughter. I said, oh my God. But yeah, that was, yeah. Oh, and then if you're Black, okay, because it's different for every race, I would type in your last name and plantation. Ooh. Like if somebody gave me that tip a long time ago, my journey would have been shortcut. I'm like, I would have skipped through a lot of stuff.
That's heavy to even think about.
Yeah.
I gotta put in. Wow. Can you go into the 1870 hump? Like what is that in research when you're looking into your genealogy?
Yes. So up until the 1870s, we have what's called the U.S. Census. So, and they started around that time. And, they take documents of like census of who people are. But around 1870, we basically stopped becoming human and start becoming property. So when you get to 1870, like you're not going to see your ancestors as people. Then you have to go to slave records, ship schedules, like wills to find your ancestors. So that's like the hump. So like don't don't get, if you're going through your history and you hit that wall, that is why. And you have to get creative to get over that wall.
Thank you. We have a question from YouTube Academia. He says, why is it important to hear white people apologize?
No, that's a nice question. Because as a person who grew up with anti-Blackness and self-hate, I needed to hear, I didn't ask for an apology, okay? So let's get that. But I know the benefits that I received because I heard it. And like I said, I received deliverance and he lifted off because this guy related to me. This guy wasn't a random white guy who's just, oh, I'm sorry for what. And I believe that if a random white guy told a random Black person, I'm pretty sure maybe the same deliverance might happen. But me and him are connected. And he said, wow, I apologize. And like I said, I experienced healing through his apology. And even in the book, I wrote that if you are Black and you're reading this book, you were with me in that room receiving that apology. Accept it. And if you're a white person reading this book, use it as a template and bless somebody. No, the healing and reconciliation is needed. And this is why we haven't got reparations and why what's happening in Florida is so tragic because everybody doesn't want to talk about our history. So if an apology can't even happen on an intimate level, how are we going to receive justice? How are we going to see reparations on a higher level if we don't even want to receive it on this level? It's impossible. We got to get it here before we get it there. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think you got it. He didn't say anything else yet. So we'll wait. Did anyone else have any questions in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
I came in late as well, so I'm not sure if you covered this. But how has like your own journey of like self-discovery and like finding your ancestors, how has that affected like the rest of your family if that has?
Ooh, that's a nice question. That's a nice question. What do you think about that? How has my journey of self-discovery affected the rest of my family? Okay, so my mother believed that she was a part of a certain community, and I almost spoiled that book for her. So there's a sense of pride that my mother carries, but ultimately, because I could be long-winded with that one. Because due to my anti-Blackness, I wouldn't even date men who are darker than me, right? Isn't that sad? That's so sad. Okay. So my husband is from the continent. And when I tell you that that's a miracle, there would be no way I would A, date an African man, and B, or somebody darker than me. So the fact that I brought somebody foreign into our family for the first time has greatly impacted my family. And even like the conversations that, because when you're around some cultures, you try to relate. So I'm like, oh, look at my family ignorantly trying,
Please give an example.
Okay, so for example, me and my husband went to my sister's house with her husband, and I think it was for Thanksgiving, and he's just like, look, my husband's name is Pedro. He's right there. Said, hi. Everybody waves to my husband. My husband waves. So my brother-in-law is like, I make couscous. Like, that was his way to relating to my but like couscous, that's like a North African thing. And my husband, he tried. It's West African. I'm like, oh. Yeah. So that's an example that this came to the top of my head.
Wow.
Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you ended up having to go to sort of, I guess, the white people in Ancestry to sort of get answers for your ancestry questions. I'm just curious, did you find that, I don't know how many you reached out to, but were all of them receptive to talking to you? Or was it kind of, not so much?
Are you talking about the white people that I was reaching out to find my
Yes.
my grandfather? Oh my God, that's a nice question. I talk about that in the book. No, most of them weren't. A lot of white people who I DM'd, slid in their DMs, were racist. Some of them blocked me. Some of them said that they have no Black people in their family. One older white woman chastised me for not knowing how to navigate her online public family tree. And in the back of my book, I talk about in one of my tips, saying, don't let that discourage you. Because the first time that happened, I'm like, oh no, I'm not DMing another white person at all. But if I had done that, I wouldn't have met the white cousin, and then all the other white people I met. But no, a lot of them weren't. So that's something to look out for if you are reaching out to white people.
And just so everyone knows, that is Angela Nelson. She has an event here tomorrow, also dealing with genealogy, and it is For the Culture. What's the extended title? For the Culture?
A genealogy handbook for the cool kids.
Yes, so please join us tomorrow to learn even more about this topic. Okay, we have another question. Yes, please.
Okay, so I enjoyed reading your book. The first chapter depressed me a lot. It was the hardest chapter for me to read.
Yeah.
The chapter about you getting saved was the funniest. I loved when you told the pastor, I didn't read the Bible yet. It was funny. A few years ago, I gifted my husband the test kit from Ancestry.com, and he found out that he was 90% African. He got the same questions they were asking. Yeah, this is my husband right here. Everybody wave to him. They were asking him the same questions, like, where you from? And he was like, oh, all American. Oh, I'm 100% American. And when he found out that he was 90% African, that changed his life after that. I also asked my aunt to take the test, the DNA test, because my aunt is 81. And I'm going to give my mom, who's 84, the test also. So thank you for writing the book. But I would also like to ask you, how did you start writing? Because I would like to also write my own memoir.
Oh, wow. First of all, hearing your testimony is just bringing me so much joy. And yeah, a lot of people share the same sentiments that chapter 1 is hard. But I'm funny, so keep reading. You take the medicine, but there's some sugar in it. But yeah, to write the book, so I should say that when God called me to find my ancestors, I saw myself doing a movie. So me and my ex, this was supposed to be a movie. But I've been a journaler my entire life. But when I saw that, like, how God was using, like, how, like, certain, like, miracles were happening in the book, with the movie, you wouldn't have seen any of that. It would just have focused on the genealogy, like, breakthroughs that, because the story, like, on its own, without the extra stuff, is a fantastic story. But if people knew how many times I got on my knees and cried out to God, and how, like, what was happening behind the scenes. So anyway, that's why I was writing. So when it came down, like when me and my ex broke up, and I had a whole manuscript already ready. So like when you read my story and said like how depressing it was, it's because you're actually reading the pages of my diary. Like I have no chill in this book. For people who haven't read it, like it is super raw because you guys are reading the pages of my diary. So if you are a journaler, I still have some tips for you. I read a book called How to Write a Book If You Flunked like your English class, like something like that, by Vic somebody. Try to find it. The book is read. That's not helpful. But in the book, he basically said that if you want to write a book and you're not a writer, record yourself having a conversation and having it transcribed. So what I did was I got me a free account at freeconferencecall.com. I think that's the website. And I had my friend who witnessed a lot of the story. I said, okay, I read through all of my journals and you have your own prepared questions. So anyway, we both called into the line and we had a 2-hour interview over the phone. Once it was over, I went on to freeconferencecall.com and they transcribed the entire conversation. So I heard like another feedback saying, wow, Vicki, it felt like I was at a cafe and you were telling me the story. It's because my story was spoken like a conversation. So that basically became the outline of my book. So the content was already there, but like I didn't want to type out my notes. So so have a conversation and record it. And it could be as easy, we have like text to talk, on our phone. Yes, or talk to your phone and do it that way. And because like I talk about my financial struggles throughout the book. So when I tell you this book has been done so economically, I give God all the glory. I went to Fiverr.com. Shout out to Fiverr. Pay me. I found my editor on Fiverr. You can actually hire a ghostwriter on Fiverr. My formatter, who formatted the book to be uploaded on Amazon, was also from Fiverr. My sister photographed this photo of me on her cell phone. Okay, I did the cover myself on
That
Canva.
cover is gorgeous. Can we
Yes,
talk
yes.
So I hope those tips were helpful. If you need more, get my number. Girl.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to make a real quick announcement. She is giving away 2 23andMe DNA kits. So if you didn't already get your raffle ticket, raise your hand and I will pass one along. Does anyone else have any questions? Clap if you got a question. Go ahead.
I might have missed it because I walked away, but did you tell us the results of your ancestry test, like where you're from? I missed that part, I think.
No, I didn't talk about it.
Oh,
Because that's like a juicy part of the story.
okay.
Okay,
So
you know what? I'll give my
maybe a
can
little
give
bit.
one. Okay.
Give us a little.
Yes. So my mother DNA tested 100% African. So when you said that your husband DNA tested 98, we're rare. Okay. And most of her ancestry mix came from the southeastern Bantu, and that's and South Africa is part of that. But my mother, because she's very dark skinned, when I asked her where do you think she's from, she said, "Oh, I know I'm Zulu." And the reason why she was so confident in saying that was based on the show that came out, in the 80s, Shaka Zulu. And apparently they used actual actors from the tribe, and all of them look like my uncles. So and I remember hearing this when I was real young. Oh, I know I'm Zulu. I know I'm Zulu. So it was beautiful for me to go on this journey and basically confirm that for her. The reason how I got caught up, you didn't ask me this question. The reason why I went to AskYourAncestry.com is because when I realized that my mother DNA tested 100% African, I said, wait a minute, that can't be right. So I said my movie, when I was working on the movie, I said could actually be an advertisement for Ancestry.com. But at the time, I didn't see any advertisements of Black people on their commercials. So I sent them a crazy email saying, you guys can read the email that I sent them. But anyway, based on that email, they're like, you want to come to Utah and come talk to us about that? So when I spoke to the experts, they're like, oh, did you take a DNA test? And I'm like, oh, not me, but my parents. So when I told them that my mother was 100% African, they started freaking out. I said, what y'all freaking out for? I said, that's y'all test. I said, like, what do you want me to do? So I'm like, do you think I'm lying? So I pulled up the results on my phone and I passed them the phone. And the lady she's like, no, this can't be right. So she goes in the back and grabs another DNA test. So she's like, do you have any living grandparents? And I said, yeah, my grandmother is like 96 years old. That's what I'm saying. Your testimony really blessed me. I'm so happy that your people are up in age and they can take DNA tests. And I said, yeah, my grandmother is 96. She's still living. So she's like, yeah, we need to test her to make sure that these results are right. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So she basically tells me that African Americans average out as 74% African because of our shared history with white people. So she was just like, no, he's like, are you sure your mother is American? I'm like, yeah, she's from South Carolina, and her parents are from South Carolina, and her parents are from South Carolina. And so, yeah, so shout out to your rare husband. Yeah, so yeah, that's. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question plus more.
Yes, ma'am.
So I heard you say South Carolina. Do you have any? Are you a Gullah or a Gullah descent?
I believe. Okay, so the book really follows my father's ancestry. So no, I think like the Gullah people were close to the coast, and we're kind of like his people are like in the middle of South Carolina. But my mother, I do have a strong inclination, but I've been so obsessed with my father's ancestry, so I can't confirm that as of right now.
Did your grandma test at 100% too?
You know what? Unfortunately, and this is why you're going back to your testimony is blessing me so much. My grandmother couldn't produce enough spits to fill the vial, and unfortunately, she's no longer with us. So this is why my mission is to, and I love your vision, is to talk to the youth because time is of the essence. Like our griots, our ancestors, they're not gonna live forever. And I wish and like I said, I talk about my financial troubles. I wish I could have afforded like the one that could like scrape her cheek or something, but there was no time.
How much
faith do you have in these ancestry tests? I know I've taken 23andMe. I was just looking at my results. I'm 96.3 sub-Saharan African.
And you're American?
I'm American.
Oh, you rare girl.
Yeah. But, you know, I just wonder, because I know, like, when my daughters took it, we all had a spitting session around the table. Did the whole thing, and now I sent off for Ancestry to cross-reference, because
Yes.
they say sometimes, like, the chromosomes, they test a certain length of it has more of one than the other.
Yeah.
So how much, you know, faith should we as African Americans really put in this system of, you know, scientific discovery?
Mm-hmm.
And how much do we really trust these companies with our, you know, DNA and our history?
You know, first of all, at the end of the book, I said that a second common question that I always get is, "You're not afraid, like the government like has your DNA?"
Oh, we got everything anyway.
You know, and you know what I tell? And my response is, I said, she's like, do you think like they're gonna clone you? And I said, I believe that they're going to clone me, but I pray that I'm in heaven by the time that happens. So, like I said, I'm not putting all of my faith in these DNA tests. This is why I don't have any brand loyalty. I said, take whatever DNA test and upload it to GenMatch, because they're gonna connect you to an actual human being. So if they're saying that you're sub-Saharan African, let's say, you know, you have like a good percentage of Ghana, and you upload it to GenMatch, and you have another human being from Ghana, like that's your confirmation. In the book, I talk about how I met another white lady. Y'all need to read the book because that discovery is amazing. But anyway, she wrote a book basically trying to figure out where my ancestors in South Carolina came from. And every country that she predicted, just based on artifacts, interviews, yada, yada, confirmed what Ancestry.com had said. But since the book has been released, Ancestry.com updated their algorithm, their science, and the country shifted. So you're right. You cannot put my only faith is in Jesus Christ. Okay, but what you can do is, like I said, upload it to GenMatch and continue to do the research to find like actual artifacts to confirm whatever DNA test is saying.
So, through your journey, I know you said it's brought you to white people. I'm not sure if it works this way, but has it brought you to anyone like from Africa, like any direct descendant from Africa?
That's a nice question. Like any relatives?
Yeah.
So 23, no, not 23, excuse me. Ancestry.com, I believe that I met one person from the continent. And I'm hoping that when Africans read my book, that they'll also want to take the test, because I've had a lot of African friends around me throughout this journey, and they said, "What do I need to take a DNA test for? I know where my people from." Like, that's y'all thing. And I'm like, "Yo, we need y'all, because this is why the Ancestry algorithm is changing, because more people are taking the test and apparently getting it more right. So we need our African brothers and sisters to take the test so we can find out who they're from."
Can you look in the camera and say that again?
My African brothers and sisters. Please take the test so we can find our people. Thank you.
We have a question from YouTube. They asked something pretty similar. Do you know any of the tribes you're from? Africa is a huge place. What culture have you reconnected with?
Ooh. That's a nice question. So I'm going to refer you to book 2 that's coming out hopefully next year in Jesus' name. Because I do go to one country. I'm not going to name the country that I went to because that's going to spoil the book. But okay, in African culture, right? If the woman marries the man, the woman kind of takes the man's like cultural background. So like if you marry a Nigerian but the woman's from Cameroon, she's now considered Nigerian. So because my husband is African, now I'm still American as apple pie. Like, come on. But like culturally, if he's asking me like personally, what culture do I take on? From his community standpoint, I would be Angolan.
Okay.
Right. But because me and my husband are kingdom people, okay, we are kingdom people. That's my answer. Hopefully that makes sense. If that flew over somebody's head.
I think we'll take one last question. Yes.
So when it comes down to the DNA testing and whatever, it is helpful for the Africans on the continent to do it for so that we can kind of find that matching connection. But they also need to do it for themselves.
Amen.
I've learned over the years that a lot of them are not really sure behind colonialism, slavery, the things that happened on the continent. Because I know of people that are on the continent that have members, family members that were taken as slaves and they were just landed somewhere.
That's correct.
I watched a movie that was about Liberia, and after that war, I think the movie's called The Land Beneath Their Feet. There's so many people in Liberia that have no idea of their tribe or whatever.
Yeah.
So some Africans are in the same position, except they're on the continent where they really don't know their people, they don't know their language, they don't know anything.
Thank you. The next time I get that question, I'm gonna say just like that. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to get into the raffle?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Did everyone get a ticket that needed a ticket? Okay, I'm gonna let you do the honors. You want to shake it up and wait, yeah, shake it up a little bit. All right. Drum roll. All right, just call out the number. Look at your numbers, people. Look at your numbers.
Did you call out the whole number?
Yes.
Father, in the name of Jesus, whoever owns this ticket, they'll be a millionaire in Jesus' name. 3789 239. No, 239. Yeah! We're a millionaire! When you get your money, remember me.
Oh, yeah, the second one coming. There's a second chance to win.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have one more. Drum roll.
This person will own a luxury car in Jesus' name. 3789244.
I wanted to
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Please, when you get your car, come on.
I had a feeling I might win.
Okay, I'm just looking at
Yes,
some of
when I
the
get my
comments.
car.
People are telling people basically read the book because the information that they're asking about will be there. People on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we are going to close this out. Unfortunately, we can't have you here all night. Are there any words that you would like to leave us with about Akata or your personal journey?
If I could leave you with any words, I hope that this book inspires you to follow your dreams. You know, I didn't market this book as a Christian book, even though I am a believer. You know, this book is for everybody. And, you know, actually, can I share one testimony, okay? So, one of my friends, he's gay, right? Gay white guy. And he said, Vicki, I read your book. And he said, you said your book gave me revelation on a dream I had years ago. And he says, I had a dream that I was in the middle of a mountainous place next to a DNA facility. And I saw a couple arguing like they had no sense. And that's exactly what I described in the book. I was in a mountainous area in Utah, it's very mountainous, and me and my ex were cutting up in the park. I talk about it in the book, please get the book. And he's just like, is it weird that I pre-experienced what you were going to experience? I said, yes, that's a prophetic dream. This man is not a believer. But he's like, thank you for writing the book, because years, I'm like, I've been trying to figure out what the heck that dream meant, and I got my answer. So hopefully, you know, I inspire you guys to follow your dreams, because I believe you'll find your purpose in them. And I pray that this book brings healing to the African community. I pray that this book brings empowerment to the white community to take ownership of, you know, what their ancestors did in slavery, so we can all move on and get the reparations that we deserve. Because I believe this country will never really prosper until they do right by our people. Period. I think that's it.
On that note, thank you all for coming. This has been Akata, the saga of an American girl finding her roots. If you would like to purchase the book, you can do so at the counter, and then come back up here and Miss Victoria Carlos will sign your book. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.